Hello, and welcome to Pierre the Chef, the show where we're never quite sure when the live stream has actually started. Um, I'm Christopher. I'm here as always with Steve. Say hello.
Hi. Hi,
I said
everybody.
I said say hello, not hi.
Hello.
Now I'm just being a pain in the neck already. We're only 5 seconds in. That's always a good sign. So, welcome to Pierre the Chef. We've got a show here where we decided that we were going to try to deal with something that was a little less serious, I guess, because we do a lot of topics, a lot of shows on very depressing topics, and we decided to do something that was a little less so. Just go with entertainment this time, and
Yeah.
talk a bit about the Marvel Cinematic Universe, since it's reached sort of a not an end, but a natural conclusion point.
Yeah, it's reached a starting over point. Sort of. But before we get into that,
Hmm.
I have a question. I just have a question.
Yes.
I think you know what I'm going to ask.
Yeah. What can I say? I'm still using the backdrop. I didn't want to go back to just showing the room. I thought this was much nicer, so
No,
I'm
that
sticking.
no
What?
no no that wasn't it. That wasn't it.
That's not it.
No.
You're
No.
asking about the beverages because I've got a cream soda here,
Oh, that looks
and I also
delicious.
have. Yes, it is. Actually, I haven't opened it yet, but I've had these before, so I know they are. And I've got a hot tea, and I've got water. So I've got
Wow.
my choice of beverages, and
You
in an emergency, I've got a bottle of distilled water down here, which is more for humidification purposes. But in an emergency, I'm sure it can actually be drunk because it's just water. So
that's
yeah,
I
that's my
actually
bev.
I have some coffee in my Star Trek mug, which I find. Where's Pierre?
That was kind of abrupt. But Pierre is upset. He didn't want to do this because I don't know if he's messing with us or not.
Who can
He's
even tell
upset
at this
about.
point?
Yeah, he's upset about the Marvel movie because he doesn't feel that France was properly represented.
Well, was France represented at all?
Well,
Is there any of it that takes place in France? Now that I think about it, I mean,
I'm not sure that there is, but honestly, if you're not straight and cisgendered, you're not represented in the Marvel Cinematic Universe either. So
that's
it's
true.
not an exclusive thing to France.
That's true. There might have been maybe like an episode of Agents of Shield that had some France stuff in it. I'd have to go back and look. I'm not positive.
Yeah, but I haven't. I actually have not followed the any of the small screen Marvel Universe, the TV show or anything like that. I haven't followed any of those, so I really don't know anything about it except that Phil has apparently survived in that, but not in the movies. It's like if you want to treat the TV shows as an addendum to the movies, you can, but I think the movies operate completely without
Yeah.
paying any attention to what happens in the TV shows.
Yeah, well, especially with the Netflix shows. The Netflix shows are set in the same world, but basically operate in a vacuum. Like they have no effect on anything other than whereas like Agents of Shield the last couple of seasons has been like that too. It's sort of just been off in its own little corner doing its own thing and barely even acknowledges like even major events that happen in the movies. Though they might just mention it in a line of dialogue. Like the Infinity War where like Thanos attacking Earth was mentioned like in one line of dialogue in the season finale of last year's Agents of Shield. But the first couple seasons, they actually had a couple of really direct crossovers with the movies. Samuel L. Jackson showed up as Nick Fury once, and a couple of Asgardians showed up in I think the first season. So yeah, but ever since then, I think and the new season of Agents of Shield just finally premiered this week. And unless they do some kind of an explanation later on in the season, which I don't know if they're planning to do or not, it seems like they're just going to completely ignore the movies. Like the finger snap hasn't happened. They haven't mentioned anything. Like it's just like whatever. We're just doing our show, which I'm completely okay with.
Right.
But I'm sure
So
some super fans might be like, "But wait a minute," you know.
So you got the movies, and if you want to believe that the TV shows happen at the same time, you can, but there's no like strong commitment to that. It's like
Right.
the movies are the movies, and they're the ones that are raking in the billions of dollars, and they're not going to trip over themselves or change what they're going to do because of a throwaway line of dialogue in season 3 of Agents of Shield.
Right. Exactly. And that's completely, like
Reasonable. It's
the again we come back to what should be the most sacred mantra of all fans the Mystery Science Theater song. Just say to yourself, it's just a show. I should really just relax. Maybe it doesn't make perfect sense. That's okay. It's all just made up. It's fine.
Yeah. Because there are people who are taking Endgame a lot more seriously than they probably should.
Yeah, so let's talk about. I guess Endgame is the obvious place to start because it's the big. Is it the biggest movie in the history of the universe? Has it outgrossed movies on other planets at this point?
It has. I think that in like less than 2 weeks, it got like 80 or 90% of the way to Avatar for worldwide revenue.
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't know how these numbers change when you adjust for inflation, because I know that adjusted for inflation, last I heard, Gone with the Wind was still the top grossing movie of all time.
Yeah, by a pretty comfortable margin.
Right, yeah. But I mean, still, I mean, I think that that Endgame has a chance to blow, maybe not Gone with the Wind out of the water, but Avatar. I don't think Avatar is going to hold up.
No, well, I think it's. I mean, the thing to remember is it's been out for what, 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And it's already like number 2 of all time on the all-time list. So, I think it's going to do pretty good. Yeah. So anyway,
I will say, leading into this, I mean, I wanted to mention I like something about Infinity War, a scene early on that I really liked. And I know we're going back just a touch here, but
that's fine.
I mean, it's sort of the partner movie. Despite how long the movies are, I like the fact that they take time to allow them to breathe instead of just pushing right into the story and trying to push it along as fast as possible. Because very early in Infinity War, when the ship, the Ring, first shows up over the city, I guess Tony and some of the others are with Doctor Strange.
Yeah,
and Tony's agonizing over calling Captain America, and then that's probably one of the last scenes that that Robert Downey Jr. did that wasn't in front of a green screen in that entire movie.
Right.
It's like 10 minutes in. But he, and then there's the rumbling that interrupts, and they look around, and you see the people outside, and they step out, and you've got people panicking and people running, and you've got heavy wind, and stuff is blowing through the sky, like cars are flying around. And they take the time to do a whole build-up where they're going down the street, they're trying to get to the spot where this is happening, find out what's going on, and it does a build. They're grabbing people along the way, trying to get them to safety as they're racing down, and the entire thing is like shot at eye level. So all of the effects, as far as wind and stuff being blown around, is above the camera angle, which sort of gives that's something they do by design to try to give you the impression that make it seem bigger because of the fact that everything is happening above ground level, but you're looking at everything from ground level. And they finally get around and they see the ring, and and the scene continues. They could very easily have said, "We need to save time in this movie. We're going to have the rumble in the building, and Tony Stark's going to look up, and then we'll just cut to the ring over the city and have everyone out there looking up at it and continue the story from there." But they actually took the time to do the build up and to create the atmosphere rather than just try to jump forward. And I thought that was, even with how important the time is and how long the movie is, it's important that they did stuff like that structurally to make the movie work, as opposed to just trying to make the plot happen as fast as possible.
Oh, for sure. And by the way, we forgot to mention this. Hopefully, it goes without saying. Spoiler alert.
Oh yes.
We'll just assume anybody watching this has seen Infinity War and Endgame and all the other movies that we're going to talk about. So if you don't want anything spoiled, you haven't seen whatever, you might not want to keep watching. But
I meant to say that early on, and I completely forgot.
I meant to too. But that's one of the things that I have to say. You're right to point out that these movies are not necessarily to be taken seriously in the same way that a serious art film or something is taken seriously. I completely agree with that.
Yeah, this ain't Mystic River.
No, God, no. Although if Clint Eastwood did show up. But I do think that, especially among sort of film critics, capital F, capital C, they don't get their due as films, because even though they're popcorn movies and even though they're mostly just commercial entities just there to charm us out of our money and entertain us, there is some
doing a fabulous job on all those fronts.
doing a better job than I think even the people who conceived it could have hoped for. But they're really, really well made films, and the fact that they have sort of pulled all of these very talented filmmakers into the Combine, including the Russo brothers, who have sort of been in charge of the main Avengers movies for the last few goes, really speaks to, the quality of the franchise, because these filmmakers really know how to make a movie on a technical level and on a creative level. And I said in my video review of Endgame, and I think I said a similar thing in about Infinity War too, like just the fact that any of this is comprehensible is kind of a miracle, because there are so many characters here and so much is going on. And yeah, of course, it really, really helps if you've seen the other movies, mostly for like emotional beats, right? Like there's a really important moment near the end of Endgame, after the snap has been undone and all the people have come back, where Scarlet Witch like confronts Thanos, and she references him killing Vision in the last movie, which hasn't even been mentioned in this movie up to this point. Yeah. And she has this really powerful moment where she's like, "You took everything from me." And if all you've seen is just this one movie, that means nothing to you, because you don't know who this person is, you don't know what she's talking about. So that you have to have seen the other movies. But in terms of just the plot and what's happening on screen, you can follow it even if this is your first Marvel movie. You can just be like, okay, I get it. This is pretty simple. They want to kill that guy and he did a bad thing and they want to fix the bad thing he did. And the fact that you have 20 major characters and like the villain, but like different versions of the villain from different time periods, and all this shit is going on. And
you got heroes running around in 5 different time periods at the same time.
And you can follow it. It doesn't mean as much to you, I wouldn't think, if you haven't seen the other movies, but you can follow it. It's comprehensible just in bare terms of plot and character motivations. And that is just an amazing accomplishment.
Well, it's a very difficult balancing act to work when you're doing a series of any kind. But you have to run the balance between paying things off that require you to understand, what has come before, but at the same time making it accessible to people who are coming in the middle. I mean, you don't want to set up the Marvel Cinematic Universe that if you haven't been watching since Iron Man 1, you're clueless. Right. So you have to find that balance. And for a movie like Endgame that is very publicly paying off, 10, 11 years of buildup, and is the 22nd movie in the franchise, you do have a bit of leeway to include things that are not necessarily going to be comprehensible if you haven't been watching right along, simply because this is a payoff for the 21 previous movies, and you can't explain everything in this one as well. But you still have to, as you said, make it understandable if you're coming in blind, that the plot will still make sense even if all the character moments don't pay off for you.
Right. And well, the other thing is, because those 21 previous films have all been blockbusters, they have a level of comfort in, if we do put some stuff in here that is kind of inside baseball for Marvel fans, that's okay, because even if only people who are fans of the MCU movies come to see this movie, it's still going to make $1 billion. Like, it has saturated the culture to such an extent that even if they play just to their own audience, it's still going to be a massive success financially. So there's that too. Like, just the sheer scope of this franchise, even if you look at it in just completely, just ruthlessly capitalist terms, which is the worst way to evaluate films, I just want to say, but the fact that they have made this franchise where there hasn't been a bomb yet. There have been
the closest thing to a bomb they had was the second one, The Incredible Hulk.
Yeah, which nobody even remembers, because now Ruffalo is the Hulk, and they're like, oh yeah, I guess that technically is part of it.
Yeah, and it was so long ago, they were still figuring out what they were doing. I understand that at that point they weren't 100% committed to the whole cinematic universe, combined universe anyway. But I remember that was the one that I sat in the theater, and I'm like, I miss Ang Lee.
Yeah, me too, buddy.
That one was, I'm watching it, and like the character in the movie Hulk that's not part of the cinematic universe was so good, and like there's awareness in the characters. General Ross was like, I took care of I took care of his father, and I threw him in jail and didn't give a thought to what happened to the kid. And now look at this. And like, there was actual awareness, and then you get into the Incredible Hulk, and Ross is just like the cackling villain, and his daughter was like, Betty was. There's one scene where it's like she gets upset at him and says, "You have no right to call me, daughter. You're not my father anymore." And literally the next scene, something happens, there's a crash, and he's hurt, and she's screaming, "Daddy!" And it's like, this is such false drama.
Yeah.
And then it ended with music swelling and swooping camera angles as two giant CGI constructs smash each other. I'm sitting in the theater like, this is just awful. Is the only one that I really just did not enjoy on pretty much any level.
See, I think I liked it more than you did, but at the same time, like, I think I saw it once. I got it on DVD. I didn't see it in the theaters because I resented it because it was a reboot of Hulk, which I think is a masterpiece.
Yeah. Although I did like the fact that they at least started in the same place where they left Hulk, they left Bruce Banner at the end of the previous movie. So even if it's not technically the cinematic universe, it still sort of flowed without making you like try to mentally erase what happened before.
They did kind of a Superman Returns deal where it's like it's kind of in continuity, but also it's kind of not,
it was a nice balancing act to try to walk, which is one of the nicest things I can say about that particular movie.
Well, the thing I thought it was fine. And like I said, maybe if I watched it now, I would either like it more or like it less. I don't know. But I remember
That's leaving your options open.
Yeah. Or maybe I'll like it exactly the same. But like, it struck, the thing that disappointed me about it was that it seemed conventional. And Ang Lee's Hulk movie was definitely not conventional as a superhero movie anyway. And it even seemed more conventional than Iron Man. And Iron Man was a pretty conventional superhero movie too. It was just pulled off with a great deal of skill. But Hulk, the Incredible Hulk, seemed conventional even compared to Iron Man, where it just felt like, they just want to make like a safe Hulk movie to placate the fanboys who were alienated by the Ang Lee movie and just want to see Hulk smash, and so here's what they get. And it wasn't I didn't think it was bad, but it was just like, okay.
DC did the same thing, doubling down on. They did the same thing with Man of Steel. After Superman Returns, they made people claiming, well, Superman didn't hit anyone, so they tried to deal with that. And then
he hits people now, buddy.
And then they really doubled down on it too. But. And even before that, there was Iron Man, which it's hard to believe, looking back, that there were people in the studio who did not want Downey in that role.
Yeah,
that is astonishing when you think about it, because he's basically been the linchpin that the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe is hinged on, and it's going to be a big issue trying to figure out what to do going forward now. But Downey, I mean, he is the reason why Iron Man is now a household name, because that character was basically B-list Marvel. If you did not follow Marvel Comics, you did not know who that character was.
Oh, yeah.
And now everyone in the country knows Iron Man, and that is pretty much entirely Robert Downey Jr.'s portrayal.
The remarkable thing, when you think about it, and it's hard, like, as someone who has followed comics in different degrees of paying different levels of attention to them for most of my life, I remember when the Avengers in general had kind of become the B team at Marvel Comics, where it was all about X-Men, and occasionally Spider-Man would kind of jump up there and get a lot of attention. But the Avengers were sort of like, everybody knows the Avengers. The Avengers were continually published the whole time and did like big stuff. But it was like, it seemed like whenever there was a big, Marvel Comics event, it was, sometimes it was Fantastic Four. It was usually X-Men. Sometimes it was Spidey. And
but they were the big ones. That's why they sold the rights off to avoid bankruptcy back in the 90s.
Right.
They sold the movie rights off. That's why they're not part of the cinematic universe, because they were sold because Marvel Comics was bordering on bankruptcy in the 90s, and they sold the rights in order to keep the company afloat.
And even Captain America, who I think was always the most well-known of the Avengers, had kind of drifted into the background. And now, after these movies, it's completely the opposite, where it's like now the least of the Avengers is considered like, you know, at least a B plus player. I don't know if we could still call Hawkeye an A character, but he's a hell of a lot more elevated than he was. And certainly Cap and Iron Man are like the cream of the crop. Like they're some of the most recognizable comic book characters in the world. And it's because of these movies. Like before these movies, they were just like, oh yeah, Captain America, I've heard of him.
Yeah. What's amazing is that, and everyone knew who the Hulk was, and the cinematic universe has gotten 20 movies without doing a Hulk movie.
Right, which is probably why their version of the Hulk is so popular. Because he hasn't had to carry a movie by himself.
Quite possibly. So, I mean, and they built it up, and they brought us into the Avengers and did this team-up movie that had really never been done before. That was an unprecedented thing. And I think I was going to have a soft spot for it just for that reason, because I don't know how well that's going to hold up in the long run as far as what the movie is and the plot and so on. But that was game changing, because it had never been done before. I mean, you'd sometimes see characters cross over, but you'd never seen anything like a comic book team up where you have 5 movies with 5 different characters and then they all come together in another one to be, as part of the same film. That was unprecedented.
Yeah, the audacity of that. Well, because the great thing about it, and the great thing about the Marvel movies in general, I think, is that somebody finally got the bright idea to say, let's just do the movies like we do the comics. And I think up until that point, I'm sure people had suggested that before, but somebody said, yeah, but we can't do that because, okay, we did Iron Man, we got lucky with that one, but nobody's going to go see a Thor movie. We can't make a Thor movie. If we release Thor and it's a bomb, then the whole fucking thing is dead. We can't do that. But somebody said, no, but let's just try it. And they did it. And then they said, let's do a Captain America movie. Fuck it. And they're like, okay. And people fucking loved the first Captain America movie. And they were like, oh shit, this might actually work. But if they hadn't taken the chance, like they had, to me, the riskiest one was Thor. Somebody had to say, we're going to do a Thor movie. We're going to give Thor his own movie.
As part of phase 1.
Yes, as part of phase 1, just so he can show up in Avengers and people will know who he is. That's the only reason. And they did it. And it worked, and it's actually not a bad movie, which is the crazy thing. It's like, the first Thor is actually okay. It's a pretty good movie. It's a better Superman movie than any Superman movie that's been made in the last 10 years. And, and it worked. And I was like, God, the audacity of it. I think to me, like, as a fan, and seeing how comic book movies used to be handled as compared to the comics, like the audacity of saying, we're going to do the Avengers and we're going to do it right. We're going to introduce the most important characters first in their own movies, even if nobody's ever fucking heard of them. And then we're going to bring them together. And that's what they did. And
then they got because they had enough success, they had enough capital built up, they started doing other things that people hadn't heard of. I mean, when they decided they were going to do a Guardians of the Galaxy movie, people were like, well, wait a minute, what? People who knew the
Guardians of what?
Yeah, but they managed to pull that off, and then they did and then they started bringing out like even C-list characters like Ant-Man. Who would have expected that Ant-Man would become a major part of the Marvel universe?
And again, just like happens often in the comics when they do those major crossovers, a character that maybe isn't the best-selling character gets incorporated into the story and becomes a really, really important part of the story. Like in DC Comics, I haven't read any major DC Comics forever, so I have no idea what's going on over there. But
neither did they for the longest time. Although I understand they're finally starting to clean that up now. They got out of the New 52.
Yeah, they've done like
it was chaos for a while.
They've done like 2 or 3 different reboots since I stopped reading. But I remember like in the 90s, it was always somebody like the Atom would all of a sudden be like in the crossover would be like, oh hey, the Atom, he can do things that might be useful to us. And it's like nobody gives a fuck about the Atom, but all of a sudden he's like this super important character, and the Marvel movies have found the same thing. It's like, yeah, it's not as if like Doctor Strange is burning up the fucking bestseller list, but let's give him a movie. Oh, that turned out pretty good. Hey, let's make him super important in the most important Avengers movie, and it works fantastically.
Yeah, and they've done a good job of not letting anything go to waste, while at the same time not making you look at every little thing like, I wonder when that's going to come back. Because there
Yeah.
are certain things where you can tell that things are left open and they're going to be brought back. But Marvel's done a good balancing act on that as well. Of things from the past will come back, but at the same time, you don't watch the movie saying, "Oh, that's a hook for later."
Yeah.
I really think that I suppose it was the idea from the beginning, but nobody expected Bucky to come back after he disappeared in the 1940s in the first Captain America movie.
Right.
But then he shows up again, and he's given a reason why he survived that long in a past that all of a sudden becomes a very big issue for Iron Man as well.
Yeah.
And became basically the breaking point in the Avengers at the start of Phase 3 after Age of Ultron, when Tony finds out that his parents were killed by Bucky, who is now still alive and is Cap's longtime best friend. And I mean, that movie was just heartbreaking at the end, because you've got the two heroes fighting each other tooth and nail, and you understand where they're both coming from, and you kind of root for both of them, as opposed to Batman versus Superman, where you were rooting for them both to lose because you hated them both so much.
They both have terrible reasons for fighting.
But Cap and Iron Man fighting, that's just so painful. The line about, "I'm sorry, he's my friend," and Tony says, "So was I."
Yeah.
And then breaking the Tony's the power source, and Tony starts screaming, "You don't deserve that shield. My father made that shield." And so Cap leaves it behind. I mean, that scene was just that whole development was just so heartbreaking, and it was done so well. And that's something that works because it was seeded all the way back before the first Avengers movie with what happened with Bucky. So, there's a lot of forethought, a lot of foresight that goes into this, because, as you said, these are very well-made movies, and the fact is, it wouldn't work this well for this long for over 20 movies if they weren't being done right. If they were half-assing it, the thing would have fallen apart. If Zack Snyder was directing it, it would fall apart. So they've really done a good job at planning ahead and making things work and develop naturally as a scene, so they don't seem forced. So you can look back and say, "Yeah, I can see where that was coming from."
And they also have done a really good job not only of building for the future, but of knowing when to reach back. Because one of the things that impressed me every time I saw it, especially when it was like in not one of the major sort of mainline movies, but one of the spin-offs, when the plot would be driven by something that happened, like the Battle of New York. The Battle of New York resonated through every other property in the franchise for years. Even the Netflix shows, like the first season of Daredevil, the aftermath of the Battle of New York is a part of that story. And the first Spider-Man movie in the MCU, like that, the Vulture's whole story is tied up in the aftermath of the Battle of New York. And that's like, and here we are, this is like in the universe of the movies, like years have gone by, and this event is still being felt as it would have been if it had happened in real life. Same thing with Sokovia.
Too many things happen in television where it would be game-changing, but the nature of television is you forget about it and reset button it and pretend it didn't happen. And they didn't go that route. They went a much more intelligent and rewarding route, and one that's easier to screw up, but one that's much more rewarding if you do it right.
Yeah, and because you see, you just talked about the emotional stakes of Civil War with Tony and Steve, but the plot stakes about the signing the Sokovia Accords and having heroes have to register, and that's all aftermath of Avengers 2. And I don't know how far back they planned that. Like, I don't know if they were writing Avengers 2 and they said, if we just hold on to this thread, that could get us to Civil War, and then that could get us to Infinity War. Or if it just happened that they were like, okay, what's the next one? Civil War? Okay, here, why don't we just do this? Like, I don't know how much of it was come up at the time, and it just, they found clever ways to fit it together, and how much of it was planned out years and years and years in advance. But either way,
Yeah, it's probably 6 of one, half a dozen of the other.
Yeah, probably. But it works so well because, yeah, you have the emotional stakes between the two lead heroes, and you completely believe both their friendship and their anger and hurt toward each other at the end. And you also like the reason why they're in this situation in the first place, the reason why there is this, this legislation that requires heroes to register and operate under the auspices of the government. Like that all makes perfect sense.
Yeah,
Because
it's all logical,
rooted, yeah,
and it came up naturally with what happened in the movies. It's not something that was forced on them. It's something that's a very logical continuance of what came before.
And there's even a third level of it where it allows the movies to comment on superheroes. It gives the movie a reason to examine the whole idea of superheroes and whether having them do their thing would be good. Because it talks about collateral damage. It talks about unintended consequences. It talks about how, like, even if you are trying your best to do good for the world, you might still inadvertently cause harm, and then you're like your good intentions are no comfort to you, because you can see like that amazing scene in Civil War where Tony is confronted by the mother of someone who died as an indirect result of the Avengers doing stuff, and it's like you can't just say, well, I didn't mean to kill him. Like it's still it crushes him. You can see that it just devastates him, and
he goes back and he speaks to the rest of the Avengers, and he's still very much on his mind and talking about it, and you can tell that's motivating what he's going to do.
Yeah, absolutely, and yet they managed to do all of that without the movies ever being grim or dark or depressing. It's such, I mean, like if that scene. If that plot line had been in one of the Zack Snyder shepherded DC movies, I mean, it would have been the most depressing movie you've ever seen. It would have been grim and joyless and awful. And somehow the Marvel movies are able to touch on these really, really serious themes and give their characters really, really emotionally deep motivations. And yet the movies themselves, for the most part, are still just light as a feather. It's really amazing.
Yeah. At least until you get to Infinity War.
Well, then
which is when they start paying off everything they've been building up, because I mean the Tesseract goes back to the earliest one chronologically with the Captain America movie in the 1940s. So wasn't Thor coming for one of the stones in that movie as well?
Yeah, well, Thor dealt with the Tesseract and also dealt with the ether.
Yeah. So they've been building up to this for the whole time since the very early days, and then you get to Infinity War, and again, that was another incredible achievement with how many characters are involved and how much is going on, and the ending that I don't think anyone actually expected to turn out that way until it actually happened, because that was, when you're. One thing that has happened in the Marvel movies is that the good guys pretty much win always.
Yeah.
Even whenever there's a skirmish or a fight, usually at worst it's break even. And they might be down a little bit, but they come right back and they roar back and they win big time. And Infinity War was the first time where you can say that they didn't just lose, they failed utterly. What they were working to do the entire movie, they failed catastrophically. It could not have gone any worse if they had just stayed home and done nothing.
Yeah. And
there was this, staring in disbelief as the characters start evaporating on screen. I mean, that was not expected. Then you're saying, wow, Marvel's doing grim and gritty even better than DC did, and DC was mired in it.
Well, because here's why it worked. Okay, for me anyway. Here's why when Marvel goes really, really serious and really dark, it works when it doesn't.
There's some contrast to.
Well, that's a part of it. That's a part of it. It's not all just dark and grim and joyless, but we care about the people. I mean. I cannot fathom, and I've been a Batman and a Superman fan for as long as I can remember being alive. I cannot fathom why anybody would care anything that happens to anybody in Batman v Superman. There's no emotional investment in those characters at all. If Batman had killed Superman, if Superman had killed Batman, I would not have cared, because those characters did not speak to me. I did not feel close to them. I did not feel like I knew them. I did not care about them at all.
I really like your description of Superman in the movie. You said Henry Cavill's Superman just absolutely fucking hates being Superman.
Yeah, and you can't really figure. There's not even like a reason why. He's just a grumpy shit. It's like, I mean, why don't you like? Is it just because of your shitty dad and your shitty mom? Is that it? It's like, look, because I love Kevin Costner and Diane Lane, but they're shitty people in those movies. They're just shitty people. And so their son grows up to be Superman, and he's a shitty person too, because he's like, oh, I have to be Superman. I have to save people. You know, and it's like, oh boy, I hope they make 5 movies about him. Whereas in the Marvel movies, it's like they seem like real people. They seem like when they form friendships with each other, like even stuff like when Captain America and Black Widow, Natasha, form a friendship. It's like you believe that they're really friends. They have scenes together in Captain America movies where she pops up, and in this movie, in Endgame, where they have a couple of scenes together, where it's like you really believe that they're friends, that they care about each other. So once you have, yeah,
they even had throwaway, like the stinger at the end of the first Avengers movie is after everything that's gone on and all the high action, everything. It's like the 6 or 7 of them sitting around in a restaurant sharing a meal.
Yeah,
and that's just a human moment.
Yeah, so
that's more humanity than we have seen in the DC cinematic universe.
Yeah,
you know, well, I guess the Wonder Woman movie is actually pretty good, but Superman and Batman together did not show as much humanity in all their appearances as that one dialogue-free stinger at the end of Avengers.
Absolutely, you want them to succeed because you want the good guys to win, but also you don't want them to fail because you care about them. And that's everything. Like, that's everything. That's why it matters. That's why at the end of Infinity War, when it was such a punch in the gut, even though you knew they were going to undo it, there wasn't a comic book fan sitting in any theater across America that believed that was going to stick. Everybody knew there was another movie coming out next year, and they had movies lined up. Christ, they had already announced another Spider-Man movie. You knew Spider-Man wasn't...
Yeah, they signed the contract for a new Black Panther movie.
Yeah, like, this isn't going to stick, and yet it works. It works.
After Infinity War, the next one they released a couple months later was Ant-Man and the Wasp.
Right. And
the stinger, the kick at the end of that, and I guess it wasn't the stinger, it was the end of the actual movie.
Yeah.
Was the snap, the vanishing happening. And I remember, they show the 3 of them are outside, and they send Scott Lang in, and he's shrunk down. He's like, okay, bring me back. I'm ready. Hello?
Yeah.
And then it cuts back, and you got the 3 clouds of dust drifting off, and people in the theater actually gasped out loud when that happened.
Yeah.
Because these movies are so well done that people are that invested in the characters that had that impact. And then they did the Captain Marvel, and then they brought it all together here with Endgame. And there's a couple of things I can say about Endgame. I mean, I really enjoyed it. It's an incredible accomplishment for how much was involved in it and trying to pay off so much, and it generally did a very credible, very good job of it. I mean, there are a couple of things I could quibble with. One thing that I really didn't like that I can get to a little later, but it really was amazing that they did that. And one thing that I will say that very much surprised me and I was very glad about, like you said, nobody expected the vanishing to stick.
Right.
These characters were coming back, and we all knew it, not even that deep down. So I spent the moment it happened, I'm walking out of the theater saying, this has reset button written all over it. I am astonished that they actually did not hit a reset button.
Right, yeah.
They undid it, but it still happened. In the timeline of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the vanishing still happened, and everyone remembers it. Either they remember it, or they remember like drifting off and waking up, and it's 5 years later. It happened. It was not erased. It was not reset button, and I was not expecting that, and I very much appreciate that they went that route.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to what we were talking about a minute ago about how well the storytelling is at at having major events in the movies resonate and actually carry consequences forward instead of just, oh, we won, the aliens are gone, and then it's never mentioned again. I feel like somebody in the writer's room, or maybe it was the Russo brothers themselves, that they just realized, like we just had the most catastrophic thing ever happen at the end of Infinity War. We know we're going to carry this franchise forward after this. We can't have this just not happen. Like we can't tell people at the end of the next movie, oh, okay, just forget about that. Because that the level of emotion, the level of significance of that event, how everybody felt in the theater when their favorite characters started fading away, right? You can't just erase that and say, oh, don't worry, now for them this never even happened. So
this isn't the goddamn X-Files.
Yeah,
thank you, Chris
or Star Trek Voyager.
But the X-Files, they actually had to start one season by saying that the previous season finale was a dream.
It was, oh my god. Because never mind.
Chris Carter screwed up that badly, but that's another story. Don't want to get into that.
Chris, just skip 5 years ahead. and have Mulder come into the office and be like, hey, Scully, it's the 5-year anniversary since all that crazy shit happened. That was wild, huh? Anyway, what's our case this week?
But not reset buttoning it and having it continue forward is very much a respect for the audience thing that is definitely appreciated.
Yeah, for sure.
I will say, as far as the vanishing and the unvanishing, that is the whole concept of that. I don't think we're ever going to see it, but that is just rife with fantastic story ideas. The thought of what would happen if something like this actually happened. What the stories of the people on the ground in the Marvel Universe, the normal people who can't fly and don't fight supervillains and so on, who will never be a member of the Avengers, their lives and how things would change with that. Simple things like the younger brother suddenly being the older brother after 5 years, or people whose spouses disappeared and in what came after, they fall in love, they get married, and now their spouses have reappeared.
And for them nothing is different. Gone.
Things like that. There is a multitude of stories, very powerful stories that could potentially be told here. It actually, if that were to be done, what it reminds me of is the Doctor Who spinoff Torchwood. In their later seasons, 3 and 4, they did stuff like this. They said, if this incredible, absurd, unbelievable thing, this completely unbelievable thing were to actually happen, how would the real world respond? And they do a deep dive into it. And they did it brilliantly in season 3, and they did it not so well in season 4. But they took the concept of, if something completely incredible were to happen, and completely impossible, but were actually to come to pass, how would the real world handle it? And they went very into detail on that, and very interesting approach. And I think that the vanishing and the unvanishing, have the potential to tell some incredible stories of what the world would have been. And judging by the fact that the next one looks like they're going on vacation to a resort town and everyone looks like they're recovering just fine, I don't think we're going to see any of that, which is actually kind of a shame.
Well, I don't know. Let's wait and see. I mean, I don't think the Spider-Man movie is going to be primarily about that. And I think that's probably a good call. But I wouldn't be judging by the trailer, where it seems Peter is at least haunted by Tony's death, if not by, the vanishing and then the reappearance. I would expect that they'll deal with it in some way. I don't think they'll just pretend that it never happened. But yeah, as far as that's one of the things that I feel like might end up being a missed opportunity for Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And I know you haven't watched it, but
Agents to deal with the vanishing like this?
Yeah, because the way they're doing it, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., the last season ended before the finger snap. And then it was announced that the current season that just started wouldn't start until after Endgame had come out. So nobody was really sure how they were going to deal with it. If they were just going to have the whole show jump ahead and be like, finger snaps over, let's get back to work. But what they've done is they've basically just gone on as though the finger snap didn't happen. Like they're just ignoring it completely. And like they did a 1 year later story, like a 1 year jump instead of a 5 year jump. And again, it's like they're just not dealing with the finger snap at all, which is fine. The show is could still, like I judge the show by the show, not the show by the show I wanted it to be. But it would have been interesting if they had done like, because they're coming back for a 7th season too. There's going to be at least one more season of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. after this one that just started. It would have been interesting if they could have found a way to do a season that took place in the aftermath of the finger snap, but before Endgame, where everything gets undone, just to sort of give us a sense of what that world is like, because we got a glimpse of it in Endgame, but not very much. And it would be because Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. has been willing to do that. They did a whole season where they were like in the future in space. Like they've been completely willing to just throw things at the wall and be like, fuck it, let's do a season with Ghost Rider. Sure, why not? You know what I mean? Like they're not married to any particular status quo, and they'll do like goofy shit if they have an idea for it. And having a season set in the aftermath of The Vanishing could have been a really cool idea, but they decided not to go that route. But that's rife with story potential.
Yeah, and the Unvanishing itself also has the potential with simple things like if this happens, then we've seen that there's sort of a collapse of civilization to some extent. I mean, it still worked, but a lot of things weren't there. I mean, baseball was gone. You'd have the issue of the infrastructure is now set up for what's left, and if you return everyone, suddenly you need twice as much food, and the infrastructure isn't there. You need twice as much housing, and it's not there. These are things that actually sort of play into what Thanos was saying from the beginning, as far as not having enough resources for people. But I mean that would be, just because everyone is returned doesn't make it a happy ending. Because realistically, logistically, there's a lot of problems that would have to be dealt with in very short order.
Yeah, that's true. It's been 5 years. The world has moved on, at least for a little bit. I don't know. In 5 years, you can't move on completely from losing half the population, but clearly
there's a new status quo.
Yeah, there's a new status quo, and now all of a sudden everybody's back. It's like, oh, okay. Do they just go back? Like, are their houses still available? Like, can they just move back into their old place? Do they just go back to their old jobs? Like, that seems a little easy.
Some businesses would have collapsed. You go back to your house and find out that it was abandoned property and other people live there.
Yeah. Hey, wait a minute. This is my house.
Yeah.
Not anymore.
There's a world of stories there, but like I said, I don't think we're going to see most of them.
Yeah. But okay. Now, since we're talking about Endgame, before we...
because it took a while because the Marvel Cinematic Universe is built to this. So we talked about the build-up a bit. But talk about the movie itself here eventually.
There is one aspect of the movie that I have not talked about, that has been the subject of some controversy. That is one of the. I think it's one of the few things. It's one of the few things about the movie that I have seen people who otherwise really, really like the movie have a major problem with. And that is the way Black Widow's death was handled. So, just to summarize for anybody who doesn't know this, who doesn't know what the objections are, Black Widow dies in the movie about halfway through when they're collecting the Infinity Stones, because I guess her and Hawkeye drew the short straw. And they had to go to the planet where you can't get the stone unless somebody dies.
Were they aware of that when they left?
It's fuzzy. I don't know. I don't see. Nebula told them, but I don't know if Nebula knew exactly what it was, what had happened. So I'm pretty sure they knew that.
We'll give the benefit of the doubt and say they went into that not knowing what the cost was going to be. I can't remember because I've only seen it once. In the scene, I don't think like Clint and Natasha play it as though they weren't expecting it. Mm-hmm.
So I don't think
Right.
it's because that would have been an awkward plane ride. Like, who's it going to be? I don't know. But anyway, so they have one of them. The gimmick with the Soul Stone is you can't get it unless you sacrifice something that you love.
You have to give a soul to get the soul stone.
Yeah, a soul must be given. Yeah, exactly. To get the Soul Stone. And so, of course, because they're both superheroes, they fight over who gets to sacrifice themselves to so that the other can get the stone. And it ends up that Black Widow wins, I guess, which means that she sacrifices herself and she dies so that Hawkeye can get the Soul Stone. And it's a great scene. It's really well played, and it's very emotionally affecting. But the end result is the only female Avenger gets killed. And that is a problem. And I thought that when I saw it in the theater, I thought, oh, that I don't know, like, do they really want to kill the only woman on the team? And and a lot of other people have picked up on that and had major problems with it. So is that something?
Not just in that sense, but also in the fact that maybe not objectively, but I would argue that Black Widow is a far more interesting character than Hawkeye.
Yeah, and here's my thought. And again, we're going to get into rewriting the movie, which is not, generally speaking, I don't think is fair play if you're critiquing a movie, because you can always imagine, like, well, I would have hit a home run. You know what I mean? Like, you can always imagine that you would have done a better job, and that's not usually that easy. But I wouldn't have struck out on that curveball. I could have hit that thing. Like, okay, sure, but.
You tell him, Mighty Casey.
Yeah, exactly. You let me up there. I would have gotten it. Come on, we wouldn't have lost the game if I had been up there. But it seems like if Hawkeye had been the one to die to get the Soul Stone, not only would it have solved the problem of, oh, they're killing off the only woman on the team, but I feel like it would have been a more satisfying payoff to Hawkeye's story, because Hawkeye was the one who got completely lost as a person after the snap, because his whole family died, and then he kind of went off the deep end and became like the Punisher with arrows. You know what I mean? Where he was just like a murderous vigilante. And so to me, if they had done Hawkeye, where if Hawkeye had been the one to do it, and they even could have had a scene with Hawkeye and Black Widow on the planet where she's like, it should be me, I should do it. And Hawkeye could have said to her something like, no, don't you see, it has to be me. You have to, in order to get the stone, you have to give up the person that you love, but all the people I loved are gone, and they're never coming back if I don't do this, And so he redeems himself for becoming a murderer, and also pays penance for that because he gives his life. And, it's like he sacrifices himself so that eventually his family can come back. And then you can have that heartbreaking scene at the end where his family comes back and he's not there. So I feel like that, that if they had gone that way, I think that could have been really, really amazing.
And I agree. And you would think maybe it's a contract thing, but then I haven't heard anything about Scarlett not being interested in continuing. And in fact, there is supposedly a Black Widow movie in the works. It's a prequel, apparently.
Yeah.
But I mean, if she's willing to do that, then that probably means that she was willing to continue in the role.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. Again, I don't usually think about stuff like this when I'm watching the movie, but with these Marvel movies, because there's so many things happening at once, it's hard not to, the thoughts just kind of come into my head. I thought after she died, and then after they made a very serious point of saying, and she can't ever come back, because that's how the Soul Stone works. You can't kill somebody and then bring them back, because they have to be gone for you to get the stone. And they made that point several times. I think Hulk even says after he brings everybody back, he says, I tried to bring her back and I couldn't. So she's...
Although Gamora slipped through.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. Like, but my first thought was like, oh, so they're doing a Black Widow movie. So how is that going to work? And apparently they're just going to bypass the whole problem and just say, oh, it's a prequel. But I can't imagine if the Black Widow movie is a success and they want to do another one. I mean, they're going to have to figure out a way to bring her back, and maybe they'll do the time travel thing like they did with Gamora, or maybe it'll be some other thing. But
we can get to that in a moment after we finish Enya. But because the hints to that are actually or at least an option for that is in the trailer for the new Spider-Man movie. But
Oh, that's right. Yeah, yeah.
one thing that I had an issue with this movie, Thor has probably he went through the ringer. He probably has the most tragic arc of any of the Avengers in what we've seen. Because we foresee him, he's like the spoiled rich kid. He's the prince.
Yeah.
He's arrogant and proud and bombastic, and he's going to do what he wants, and he knows he's going to be king and so on. And slowly, pieces of his world have been taken away until there's nothing left. There was a scene in Infinity War where he's sort of shell shocked, and he's talking to Rocket, and maybe not even entirely aware that Rocket is there anymore, and talks about how Loki died and he's come back before, but I think it's for real this time. And my parents are gone, my world is gone. We're trying to escape, and we got attacked, and most of my people are gone. And he says about Thanos, there's not really anything else he can take away from me. And that's when Rocket gave him the mechanical eye. And then the movie continues, and he's dedicated himself to getting the axe, creating the new weapon so that he can handle Thanos. And in the end, he puts the axe into Thanos' chest, and Thanos says, "You should have aimed for the head," and then disappears, which is almost a taunt telling him that you could have prevented this if you had acted just a little bit differently. And, beginning of this movie, he tracks down Thanos, finds that it can't be undone, as far as I know at that point. He kills Thanos, but there's no joy in that. There's no victory in that revenge. And when we see him 5 years later, he's a man who's given up on life. He's let himself go. He spends his days drinking and yelling at people, playing video games, and not caring about anything. He's sort of basically given up on life. Whatever you have, the post-traumatic stress disorder or the survivor's guilt or whatever else. And, I mean, it's a very plausible path for the character to follow. Only this time it was played for laughs.
Yeah, that was my problem with it too. Yeah.
And it's a very plausible path for him to follow, but what he has been through should not be the comic relief.
Yeah, because you're right. He's had it almost as hard as anybody. And, it's like, he's fat now. And it's like, do we really want that to be the thing? I mean, well, the other thing is, like, he's clearly wearing a fat suit. So his weight gain is part of the punchline. And that's kind of problematic too. It's like, do we really want to? Are we still making fun of fat people? But like, are we still doing that? Yeah, and,
a lot of it could have been redeemed, even if the characters they're trying to get through to him, and somebody goes like, if they said something like, "Dude, this is not funny. We need to help this guy." Something to acknowledge that it was more than just a joke. It wouldn't have taken much to acknowledge that and to try to pull out of it, but instead, the scene wraps up with Rocket saying, "There's beer on the ship," and Thor goes, "Ooh, what kind?" And that's how they get him, and it still laughs. And I mean, when I'm in the theater, I laughed, but I thought about it later, and I was a lot more uncomfortable with how that particular scene developed.
Yeah, and it because it feels like not the best way to handle that react. Like, if someone is traumatized by what he has been through, it's not funny, and it doesn't feel right to make it funny. And also it kind of deflates like the seriousness of it, because like, I mean, he's been emotionally destroyed. Like, he's living with serious trauma, and but there's gonna be beer, so let's go. You're right. It doesn't, just like with the Black Widow thing, like it doesn't ruin the movie for me. But it feels like a missed opportunity where they could have easily gone just a slightly different direction and not only avoided the problem, but also maybe had a little bit of a better story, at least for that particular character, And
one last thing, as far as all the traveling in time, I do appreciate the fact that they didn't really spend any time dwelling on it, because the movie was cluttered enough. They really didn't want to get in on this. But all the different places that they went back to, do you see that as creating like separate timelines that we're never going to see?
Yes.
Like Thor.
That's what I think.
Thor gets his hammer back, so you figure there's a Thor that went into the Dark World, was like, where the hell did my hammer go? And had to deal with the rest of the movie without having it.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's what Sorceress Supreme, Tilda Swinton's character, I forget her name, was talking to Hulk about.
Oh, okay,
You know,
yeah,
when he was like, "I need your stone.
yeah,
I need the, you know, the eye of whatever the fuck, the eye of Agamemnon or whatever the fuck it's called," and she's like, "Well, I can't give it to you because I need it."
yeah,
You know, I won't, if I give it to you, then I won't have it in the timeline that you'll be creating by taking it away from me. And that's when they come up with the idea of like, oh, we'll have to bring it right back. You know, we'll have to bring it back like and give it back
right,
to you the moment after we take it. And yeah, they don't do that with Thor's hammer. Like,
yeah,
nobody goes back and gives that other timeline's Thor his hammer back. So that's yeah. But yeah, I think
right,
that's what happens. I think there's just there's different timelines because that's
right. So,
I think that's how Captain America is able to come back as an old man at the end.
mhm,
He jumps from the new timeline he lived in back to
mhm,
his original timeline, you know,
mhm,
to pass the shield. I think that's the only way that
right.
makes sense.
So the Tony Stark who fought Thanos and died at the end of the movie is not the same Tony Stark who had the mild heart attack because Ant-Man was in there messing
Yes,
around with his arc reactor at Tony's insistence.
exactly. And also, I think that I don't know, because you know,
Because that creates a Loki running around who potentially could come back if they wanted to go
well,
that route.
that's what I was getting at. Because well, we know that Loki is definitely going to come back because he's going to get his own series on Disney's streaming service.
Hmm.
And Tom Hiddleston is playing him. So,
Mm,
I don't know what the plan is for that series. I don't know what the story is, but yeah, that is potentially how they could have Loki running around still alive in his own show because a version of Loki escaped in that
mhm,
alternate timeline. So there you go.
right.
You know,
And then the other option from what we saw in the Spider-Man promo for the upcoming movie was that they've introduced or opened the concept of the multiverse and things coming through from other timelines,
right,
which potentially means that anyone and anything could come back at any time.
right. Which again is classic comic book shit.
Yeah,
You know, it's like, Robert Downey Jr. wants to do another one. Hey, perfect. Alternate timeline, parallel universe. Tony, come on
yeah,
down.
and have Tom Holland there, Peter Parker. It's like, Mr. Stark, you're back. Who the hell are you, kid?
What? Who?
Yeah,
What?
yeah.
In my universe, Spider-Man looks like Tobey Maguire.
They could actually bring the Tobey Maguire one. I always thought
Oh,
that was
wouldn't that
something
be
that
great?
I thought that was something. I thought that they really should have done a Superman movie that dealt with that. That you would have, okay, you'd have, you'd bring them all back basically. You'd have Kane and you'd have Ralph and you'd have all of them in one movie. I
Yeah.
really thought that was something that was an opportunity that they could have done that wasn't really available to Marvel. Although I think that the door might have closed on that one. But
Yeah. Although, you know, I mean, because obviously my dream Superman movie at this point would be, I know, an interdimensional portal opens, Brandon Routh Superman flies into, you know, Henry Cavill's world and basically just lectures him for an hour and a half and makes him feel bad. Like, because I don't think Ralph Superman would like try to hurt him or kill him or anything because he's actually a good person. But he would just be like, man, what you're doing is wrong. You should be ashamed of yourself. You have a responsibility. You're Superman. And basically just make him feel like an asshole for an hour and a half and then be like, well, hey, look, I got to go. You really disappointed me. And just, you know,
yeah, but you'd use the other Supermen around to sort of like teach them by example.
yeah. Gee, that sounds familiar. Is there a major superhero film that did that recently? Yeah.
Yeah, but and it's the I had seen a clip recently of some of the Spider-Man cast on Jimmy Kimmel,
Yeah.
and I don't know if you saw that.
No, I haven't watched it.
That Tom Holland talked about how difficult it is. He said that he was there for the shooting. Everyone who was in the funeral scene at the end of Endgame was actually there. Nobody was CGI'd in. All those people were actually there for that one shot.
Yeah.
And he said that, first of all, they didn't tell him what it was. He showed up. They told him that he was showing up for a wedding scene.
Oh, wow.
And he gets there and he sees all the different people and all the characters and all the familiar faces. He's like, guys, where's Robert?
Oh, yeah, about that.
And then finds out what's going on. And they said that and you've got characters from the other movies. You got Black Panther characters there. They said that at the time that scene was filmed, Black Panther hadn't even been released yet.
Right.
And that's when Kimmel said, I can kind of understand now why none of you have any idea what you are and aren't allowed to talk about.
Yeah. Well, they had a similar situation with Captain Marvel, where Brie Larson shot her end credit scene for Infinity War, where she shows up.
Yeah.
Where yeah.
Like this,
No,
where she shows up like, "Where's Fury?"
Yeah, and or no, that's which one was that? No,
that was in Captain Marvel.
That was Captain Marvel. She shows up at the scene where she shows up with the other Avengers at the end of Captain Marvel. Right. She shot that scene before they shot any of the rest of the Captain Marvel movie.
Yeah.
So that was like her first scene as Captain Marvel when she comes back to a scene and says, "Where's Fury?" And it's like, wow. So the movie, I don't think she had even seen the script for the actual Captain Marvel movie yet. And it was and here I am with fucking Scarlett Johansson and Chris Evans, and we're it's the Avengers, and it's like I don't even know who this character is yet.
I understand that she filmed her Avengers scenes before they started filming Captain Marvel at all.
I think that might be true. Yeah.
The order of production was such that she did her Avengers scenes first, and then actually did her own movie afterward. Mm. But it's just, if you're the actor in the middle of all that, you can't keep track of what you can and can't say. That would be almost impossible.
I think that's
especially considering there's so many different properties going on at the same time. Tom Holland knows what's going on with Spider-Man, but he doesn't know what's going on with Black Panther. They're not giving him the Ant-Man scripts to see what's going on.
Right. Just so you can keep up, buddy.
Yeah. In fact, I don't know if it's true or not. I mean, if you can't really trust the trivia on Internet Movie Database, but they said that it's been suggested that the only actor who was given access to the complete script for Endgame was Downey.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense, though, because he's,
in most of it.
Yeah. Well, and that we touched on that earlier, and I want to come back to that because there was something I wanted to say about that, about Downey, and how the studio, which was not Disney at the time, I think it was Marvel, and then it was Paramount, I think, released the original Iron Man because they had not yet been bought out by Disney. But I mean, Downey himself sets the tone for the entire thing, which is just remarkable when you think about it. Because if you look at everything that makes the Marvel Cinematic Universe movies work and everything that gives them their particular personality is there in Downey's performance in the first Iron Man, where it's usually cheeky and funny and glib and always quick with a joke, and kind of self-referential, but not too much, and not too meta, but a little bit of self-awareness. And yet also capable of being absolutely dead serious and emotional and to the point of where, breaking your heart, you know what I mean? Like there's that scene in the first Iron Man when Pepper catches him, getting out of the Iron Man suit or something, and it starts out as kind of a funny scene, and then it turns into this really heartfelt scene where he says to her, "Look, I can't explain it to you. I just know in my heart that this is right." And all of the facade and all of the jokes and all of the sarcasm drops away, and he has this absolutely sincere moment. And that's all the rest of the Marvel movies. They all do that, where they're mostly just kind of fun and jokey and quippy, and here's some fun action scenes. But then when they have to get heartfelt, they just go for it, and they play completely straight and completely earnest, and that's what makes them work. Is that that they have a very genuine heart at the core of all the funny stuff, and that's Downey's Iron Man to a T.
Yeah. And the Marvel Cinematic Universe may be the first time that superheroes have existed without secret identities. And,
right.
And the last line in Iron Man where Tony Stark says, "I am Iron Man," was ad-libbed.
Wasn't even in the script. Yes, it's amazing.
And that has defined how they've treated all of the heroes since then. And in fact, "I am Iron Man" was his last line in Endgame.
Yeah. And to talk about things that that payoffs that will mean a lot more if you've seen all the movies. I mean, there are major, really, really important scenes in Endgame that pay off things that were set up in the first Iron Man movie. It's just amazing. And it's not necessarily things that were waiting for a payoff, like him saying, "I am Iron Man." Or,
that wasn't by design, because a lot of that script was ad-libbed.
Yeah, and or when Pepper puts the case holding his first arc reactor down, you know, proof that Tony Stark has a heart. And like, it's not like you were waiting for that to be paid off, but it's a callback from the first movie. And it's just like, damn, like they really nailed this. Like they really put some thought into this, and we're like, you know, and just wrung every last drop of emotion out of this.
And I think they had characters developed as well, with different opinions on things and how they approach the hearing different. And even little things like at the beginning of Age of Ultron, where Captain America says language when somebody said hell or damn or something. And then in this movie, he goes, "You've got to be shitting me."
Yes. That scene where he fights himself is so great, because it's Captain America from today, actually from 5 years from now, I guess, versus Captain America from the first Avengers movie. And, you know, he does
fresh out of the ice.
Yeah, and he does the whole, you know, I could do this all day. And he's like, I know, you know, it's just so great, because, yeah, it acknowledges that they have actually developed the character. Like, he hasn't been frozen in ice as a character for the whole time. He has actually grown and changed. And he is still fundamentally the same person, but he has changed in important ways from even the first Avengers movie.
Yeah, pretty much all of them have. He's changed. Tony Stark certainly changed. I mean, can we say that anyone, you know, Thor has been through the ringer. We went through that. I mean, Hulk, it's a whole new definition of Hulk.
Yeah, Hulk is, yeah. And as someone, I never read.
I think his scene with the Sorcerer Supreme was done just so they could have Ruffalo do a scene where he wasn't all CGI,
where he wasn't Hulkified. Yeah, and you know, I had such a wonderful just laugh of recognition when Smart Hulk appears for the first time, because I was not reading the Hulk comics at that time, but when that story was running in the comics, I think I was in middle school. And one of my best friends was like a huge Marvel Comics fan, and he was reading it. And I kind of was like sort of looking over his shoulder and kind of just keeping up with what was going on. And that was when in the comics, when you had Banner Hulk, where it was, you know, basically exactly the same as it is in the movie, where he's hulked out all the time, but he has Banner's personality and Banner's brains. And I thought, oh man, and that was like in the comics, unless they've come back to it more recently, which I don't know, but in the comics, that was like 25 years ago. And to reach back to that and to use that as an inspiration, you know, for Hulk's story in this movie, it was just awesome.
Yeah, well, I understand Peter David wrote that, and he ended up leaving the comic because the editors decided no more that we want dumb, violent Hulk back, and he wouldn't do it. So he ended up leaving. He'd been writing Hulk for like 9 years, and he left because they wanted to backslide the character, and he didn't want to write it.
Yeah. Yeah,
but I love even the difference in the Hulk, where they go back and they watch the Hulk and he smashes the taxi and jumps up and down and throws the tire off the thing, and then you've got the current Hulk just sort of embarrassed, like oh my god. And then he goes out there and trying to be he taps the taxi and tosses a motorcycle aside.
I love it. He just sort of half-heartedly does some Hulk shit, like okay, yeah.
It's just so much time and thought went into that, and you know. It's so well done. Again, the movie is not perfect. You know, you try. It's so much easier to set things up than to pay them off well. Yeah. But to the extent that it was possible, I think they did pretty much everything they could to pay it off the way that it needed to be paid off.
I agree. It was. I know that there are people. I know that there are people who have been big fans of the Marvel movies up to this point who were disappointed in it. But I mean, I respect, you know, you feel however you feel, you know what I mean? If you watch the movie and you didn't like the movie, that's completely fine. But for me, it felt like as much of a thank you to people who love this franchise as it could have been, without just having the actors just say thanks. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it was so satisfying and such a great payoff. And the fact that, you know, there was no mid-credits or end-credits scene, it really felt like, okay, obviously we're going to keep making movies, but...
Just the clanking at the end of the hammering of making the first Iron Man suit.
Yeah, like, this is the end of this, and we'll start again, you know, but this is the conclusion to this first 3 phases of the series, and I just it's hard to imagine, other than the things we've talked about already, like Thor's story and Black Widow's story.
There's Thor's story, there's Black Widow's story, there's little quibbling details like the timelines or why doesn't anyone know how to use ranged weapons instead of attacking each other like a scene out of Lord of the Rings?
Yeah,
You
but
know?
other than that, it's
You
like
know?
in big picture, it's hard to imagine how it could have been much better. And yeah.
Yeah, because it's like, when they said rain fire, it's like, well, why didn't you do that when all of the people you wanted to kill were over there and all of your people were over here?
Right.
Yeah, that would have better time to shoot at them from the sky.
Ah,
But it's not as good as it's one of those things like one of the stupider complaints I read. I think it was a Cracked article of somebody saying, "Why do you always have to snap your fingers to make something happen?" It's like, because it's a movie and that's a visual cue that the audience
right.
understands.
Exactly. And I mean,
That's why you do
technically, I guess you don't have to. I guess Hulk could have just made a fist and concentrated, but that's not cinematic.
Right.
Yeah.
You have to have some awareness of the genre, you have some consideration for it. Just like we were talking about Data Crystals on Babylon 5 and other things, you have to do things in a way that the audience recognizes.
Yeah, it has to read, and if you can put it in the form of a recognizable gesture, then that's the best thing. Like, I know a lot of people.
When you watch Star Trek, Q didn't have to snap his fingers all the time, but
no, he never had to. He never had to. He could have just had shit happen. Well, it's funny. The Star Trek thing I was thinking of is the way they staged something in one of the less loved Star Trek movies, Star Trek Into Darkness, which I've always thought was good, but I know a lot of people just absolutely despise that movie. But the scene where Kirk does the Spock, where Kirk goes to fix the engine, and in that version, there's like these two huge sort of diodes that have to be lined up in order for the engine to work. And Kirk goes in there and he's just like swinging at it and kicking it to get it to work. And, I've heard people like complain about that or whatever, but to me, the genius of that scene is it's clear what he's trying to accomplish. There's like a mechanical thing that he has to do. And okay, does it make sense that a person would be able to go inside of a warp engine and do that? Does it make sense that why would they have to be lined up? Why wouldn't it just be why not put a wire or so? Like, okay, whatever. The design doesn't make any sense. The whole thing doesn't make any sense. But what he's trying to accomplish is clear. These two things are out of whack, and he has to put them back in line. And we understand that as an audience. And because we understand that, and because we know what to expect, it gives what he's doing more meaning and more drama.
Yeah. It's actually more meaningful than Spock just reaching into a glowing light and not really clear what's happening, and not even being able to see, it's radiation blasting out, but you couldn't see, like Dad once said back when it first came out, it's like he thought maybe we should be able to see the bones in his arm with the radiation. But, but it wasn't clear what he was doing. It's like, is he mixing the antimatter by hand or something?
And even though that, I mean, I think everybody would agree.
Very powerful. But
still, the whole scene is better than the version in Into Darkness, because but the idea of, okay, let us see what he's doing and give us some kind of a visual reference. So okay, I see what he has to do. I see what he has to accomplish. And the same thing with the finger snap. It's like it's a cue. It's a visual that we know what to expect. We know, okay, if Hulk can do that, then that means they win. And of course he doesn't have to, but just go with it. Jesus Christ, would it kill you people to just go with something?
And since I know we can't get through anything without talking about Star Trek, and I apologize for that. But
we're both equally guilty.
Scene, I wanted to ask, do you remember them changing that scene between the theater and the DVD release? Because I could swear, like when you watch it in the DVD, he kicks it, and then it snaps back into place, and then the lightning or whatever happens, and he gets shot across the room. I could swear when that scene was in the movie, he kicked it, and finally it moved, and the prop went like thunk, 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 thunk. Like, it didn't snap back into place. It like slid back and it bounced a little bit before settling in. I could swear that it was in the theater. It looked like that, and then maybe I wanted to see that scene later, and I swear that was different.
Maybe it was. I don't remember that, but it's certainly possible that they fixed the effect. Maybe they weren't happy with it, and because that's been known to happen.
Yeah, because I don't remember that. It looked like a prop bouncing as it settled back into where they wanted it, and it's hard to with what he's trying to accomplish, trying to get it aligned, watching it bounce back to
Wobble
where
a
it
little.
needs to be, it doesn't quite work as well as if he snaps back in.
It's like in classic Trek when the Gorn like throws the boulder at him and it's obviously made of styrofoam, and it's like, oh, okay, well that wouldn't hurt him. You just kind of have to. But yeah, the thing I always think about in terms of like quibbling with that scene in Into Darkness is, and I think that it's just they did it really the only way they could have given the way the prop was built. But when Kirk is jumping on it and kicking it, he's kicking it at exactly the wrong angle to move it at all. Like he's kicking down on it, not trying to push it across. He's kicking down on it. And I remember watching it even at the time going, well, that's not going to do anything, but of course it's, whatever. He does what he needs. It's like that kind of shit just isn't important. Like I feel really bad for people who allow things like that to ruin movies for them. Where it's like, oh, I thought I was totally with it up until he kicked it the wrong angle. And then it just completely went out of my head. It's like, okay, I guess that's fine.
Yeah, it's like I gave up on The Next Generation when they fired the phasers and the beams were coming out at a 45-degree angle because the actors weren't able to angle those props correctly, which is why they switched into a pistol again in the future.
I had someone. The most recent example of this. I have a Facebook friend who I like and is a really good guy, but like just has nothing but problems with Star Trek Discovery. And not just like story stuff, but like really nitpicky nerd shit. Like I think it might have been one of the episodes that I guested on the Feminist Frequency podcast for, but I can't remember. But it was one, I think it was because I shared that podcast and I was like, hey, I was on, watch this to see what I thought about this week's episode. And he commented and he said, did you notice that Discovery fired phasers out of its warp nacelles? And I was like, no.
The Enterprise the Enterprise D once fired phasers out of the photon launcher. Yeah, it's just a special effects thing.
Yeah, it's like I haven't gone back to check it because I honestly could not give less of a shit. But apparently, and it was probably just an effects goof up. They had the phaser beams coming out of the end of the bussard collectors. This is the technical term for the little red things at the end of the warp nacelles. The phasers came out of that instead of out of one of the established phaser banks. And if that's what happened, it was probably just an effects goof up. And I didn't even notice it watching the episode. And now that I've been told about it, I still don't give a shit.
Or maybe there's a phaser bank on the warp engine.
Maybe there is. You don't know. But it's like that kind of stuff. I just don't care about it. If it's a shitty episode or like a shitty movie, I'm more likely to notice stuff like that. But if I care about what's happening on the screen and there's like a weird little effects goof up or something, like I couldn't care less about it. I just don't. It doesn't matter to me at all, and I feel kind of bad for people, who get hung up on stuff like that and can't let it go. Because it feels like it really just drags them out of the movie. And I just can't be bothered about stuff like that. I'm pretty sure, I can't remember, but I'm pretty sure there's a scene in 2001: A Space Odyssey, which is for the most part pretty technically perfect, where it's near the end where David comes back aboard the ship after Hal has gone to the dark side and taken all of the oxygen out. So he's like going through the ship in a spacesuit. And I'm pretty sure there's a shot from below where he's going through the corridors to go to where he needs to go to turn Hal off, where you can see clearly that the glove of his spacesuit is loose. Mm-hmm. It's unfastened. So any air would be just rushing out of it. And I noticed that.
Yeah, just like in the first Star Wars movie where the people and their fighters are going to attack the Death Star, and you can clearly see there's gaps between the helmet and the rest of the suit.
Yeah, it's like, okay, it's not technically perfect, but I don't care. It doesn't ruin anything for me. I'm not demanding that it be fixed,
I didn't decide to hate the movie Magnolia because there's a scene where the traffic light goes from red to yellow to green because they were running the film backward,
Right. It's like, it's like a weird sort of artifact or something. And it's like, that's okay.
Things happen. There's so much going on in a movie that occasionally stuff is not going to be perfect.
Yeah,
that's life. Live with it.
There are,
eye lines don't match up when they cut from one angle to another, and you can see that a person is like shifted a different way or is looking in a different direction. So what?
Who cares?
It's a reality of filming.
It's the kind of thing that I know from experience, what little experience I've had. You try desperately to get all of that stuff right while you're shooting it. Like, and especially like on a big movie, like there's a small army of production assistants that are just in charge of keeping continuity and making sure that, okay, if this shot is supposed to come after this shot, then this has to be there and this has to be there. And there's a tremendous effort exerted to get that stuff right. But sometimes you just can't get everything right, and you just have to go with it. And that's okay. Like, that's completely fine. You know, I don't watch Game of Thrones, but I have been greatly amused by the amount of hissy fit throwing over the fucking coffee cup that apparently was like visible in one shot. There's like a Starbucks cup visible in one shot. Yeah. And it's like people are like losing their fucking shit over this. And I'm just thinking, oh God, I hope that was on purpose.
Yeah, I like HBO's reaction, which basically is say, we're sorry that there was a coffee there. She'd ordered an herbal tea.
Yes, exactly. It's like and the thing is, like, I mean, it's possible that somebody that everybody just missed that. I like to think that it was left there on purpose. Either the coffee cup was there intentionally from the beginning, or it was left there by accident during shooting. And while they were doing post-production, somebody brought it up and somebody else was just like, no, leave it in. Like, because
there was such an outcry on this, you just know they're going to remove it digitally for the DVD release.
Well, or some fucking busybody nerd is going to do it. You know what I mean? And just be like, oh, look how easy it would have been to mat it out. Like, okay.
And then they'll also Photoshop smiles onto all the female characters, right?
Oh my God. Yeah, but it's like, you know, I don't know. Maybe I'm different than a lot of people, especially a lot of people who are like mega fans of like fantasy franchises. But I actually appreciate stuff like that. Like, I like the fact that if you look hard enough, you can see like the Millennium Falcon in the First Contact battle scene in Star Trek First Contact. Like, I like that. It doesn't make any sense. It completely breaks the world. But it's because I know it's there as a joke.
Yeah, in the first Star Trek reboot movie, one of the scenes of wreckage, R2-D2 is floating by in it.
Yes. And even like we talked about.
So the Millennium Falcon is a bucket of bolts that has survived the Death Star and the Borg.
Yes, see, it's a badass little ship. And we talked about this on the Late Seating podcast when we reviewed E.T. that there was the scene where E.T. encounters someone in a Yoda costume. And he goes and he recognizes Yoda, you know, and he's like, home. And we kind of chuckled about that because it's like, oh shit, does that mean that Star Wars is real in this world? Because
the ET aliens do appear in the prequels in the Senate.
Yeah. So I mean, come on.
It's like there's been a whole thing about crossover they finally did when in I guess the second Predator movie, one of his trophies was an alien xenomorph head.
Yeah, and eventually they actually did do crossovers.
It was just a background thing they put in there, but it really got people's attention.
Yeah, I don't know. I like stuff like that. I like things that if you could easily miss them. Like, I don't. Here's the thing. I don't like.
It should be a touch on the shoulder, not a jab in the eye.
Exactly. I don't like it when a movie that depends on you being immersed in it goes out of its way to shake you out of it. Mm-hmm. But yeah, a little thing like that to just sort of be like, yeah, we all know what this is, right? You know, like that I actually kind of appreciate that. You know, I like seeing little just artifacts of the real world kind of just, you know, or in jokes that don't make any sense just put in there, you know.
I like Benson and Jack McPherson on Voyager.
Yeah. I thought that was great. Like,
I thought that might have been a bit much, but I went with it anyway.
Well, I mean, anybody who reads the story you wrote who doesn't follow my stuff will be like, well, that was weird. But you know, I thought it was terrific. Yeah. And everybody should go read that, by the way. I shared it on my social media, and I'll probably mention it in in an upcoming Trek Actually video. But for anybody who doesn't know what we're talking about, Christopher wrote a fanfic for my birthday that was based on a pitch that I made in a Trek Actually video for an alternate ending for Star Trek Voyager, and it's on fanfiction.net. So you should go check that out, because it's really good.
Yeah. Your title, or the title you chose, Pale Blue Dot.
Pale Blue Dot, yeah. Which you found ways to use that I hadn't even considered. So yeah, but it turned out really, really well. And
thank you.
It's a shame that episode will never actually exist.
And at this point, we've got about an hour and a half, and I
Yeah.
think that we can reward ourselves with after doing a show about fantasy world by not dealing with Trump. We're going to set the 5 minutes of Trump slide this
Oh,
time.
yeah. Let's not ruin something that's been so fun and so joyful. Yeah, we've talked about Marvel movies and a little teensy weensy bit of Star Trek. Well, let's not spoil this.
Let's wrap it up while we're doing good.
Yeah, let's do what any good movie would do and get the fuck out. Like that. When you've got them where you want them, you wrap it up and you get the fuck out. Don't stick around and be like, let's do an epilogue. No. Just get the fuck out.
Let's do 12 prequels.
Oh God, don't do that.
Never
Yeah.
do prequels.
One of the the first lessons you learn in pretty much any writing class you'll ever take is the two most important decisions you make when you're writing a story is when to get in and when to get out. You know, and if you get both of those right, it makes the rest of it so much easier. You know, if you start and you finish with a good impression, then, you know, it's like, oh,
Then a lot of the stuff that goes on in between can slide. We've talked about that with
yeah.
some of the nonsense you hear from right-wing nutballs and conspiracy theorists. So they put something plausible at the beginning and the end,
Yeah.
and it sort of, by osmosis, lends credibility to all the garbage in between.
right. It's like, oh,
We don't want to do that. So we're going to wrap up here. We're going to finish the show here.
Yes.
We don't want to get into conspiracy theory now,
No.
because that would be a very bad direction to go in now.
No.
And we're just going to wrap up. We've done an hour and a half. It's been good. Let's not break it
Let's not ruin it. All right, so we'll be back next month to do this again about something, probably how the world is still on fire. But for now, we'll have a nice, happy show about comic books and Star Trek and superhero movies, and that'll be that. So thanks to everybody for watching. We'll be back next month to do this again.
And thanks for watching.
Yeah, thanks for watching.